Jon.
Welcome back. I assume that applause was for me. Is that correct? Welcome to the final panel of IndyFest 2025, and I can't think of a better way to conclude than with the folks that we have up here from the Bulwark. Let me introduce them very quickly, and then we'll just get into talking about whatever pretty much they want to talk about. Sure. Sarah Longwell is the publisher of the Bulwark. She was the founder of...
yeah, you can clap. That's great. Yeah, thanks.
This is like more than cumulatively any of the clapping that has gone on in any of the other panels. So I'm really excited for you guys. She was the founder of Republican Voters Against Trump, helped found Republicans for the Rule of Law. She's been in the vanguard of the Never Trump movement. Will Sommer, who is next to her, is a senior reporter at the Bulwark and author of the False Flag newsletter. If you don't subscribe, you really should. He covers all things MAGA and MAGA adjacent. I am reliably told that Will did not fly here on Kash Patel's private jet.
I wish.
Sonny Bunch is the culture editor at the Bulwark. He's also the host of the Bulwark Goes to Hollywood newsletter and podcast, and Across the Movie Aisle podcast. I'm going to say this, probably embarrass Sonny. Some of you know me pretty well, know I'm a movie buff. I wish I had been a movie reviewer some days, Sonny. But Sonny Bunch, if you don't read him, you're missing something, because in my humble opinion, he is the best movie reviewer in America. I'm restricting it to America. It could be the world. I don't know. Anyhow, thanks to all of you for being here. I really, really appreciate it. Now, it's possible, and maybe I didn't even have to ask this question, Sarah, because of the applause, but just in case people don't know, give some background on why you decided to start the Bulwark and how, from when you started, what it's become.
Yes, we started in 2018, like right at the end, because the Weekly Standard, which was a sort of venerable conservative publication at the time where Sonny worked back in the day, was sort of unceremoniously had the plug pulled on it for being insufficiently pro-Trump. And Bill Kristol, who was the editor of that magazine, said, yeah, is there something we could do to give these people jobs? And I was like, well, what if we start like a new thing? And I could go back even further and talk about how I'd had a really stupid idea to aggregate Never Trump content at one point that wasn't working. And so instead we started this new magazine, and it just met the moment in a kind of a specific way, which was we were all former Republicans, still conservatives of varying shades. Actually, there's like a lot of ideological diversity even within the current publication. And it caught fire early, but more as an internal conservative argument, like we were having arguments within the Republican Party and the conservative movement at the time about what Trump was doing, and then evolved slowly, I think, to be a real, just sort of full, fleshed out pro-democracy publication that, you know, a lot of people say like, oh, well, it's a Never Trump publication, and that was true, actually, of the original team, but subsequently we have people like Will, who was at the Washington Post. We just hired Catherine Rampell, who was their economics reporter. We brought in Jonathan Cohn, who's one of the premier healthcare reporters, and so we've attempted to build. We don't want to recreate the failing model that has been plaguing a lot of publications, but we feel like we want to build the next thing in media. Like if you guys are looking around, you're watching cable just fall apart. You're watching legacy publications sort of be adrift in terms of understanding how to tackle the moment. And I think for us, our independence has allowed us to just say, we're going to be really direct about what we think is happening to the country and what we think we need to do to push back. And that has just really struck a chord. And so now we have, you know, 1.5 million people on YouTube who subscribe to us, 1 million people on Substack, and we make everything free. Actually, the weirdest thing about the Bulwark is that we have 111,000. Anybody paying subscriber to Bulwark Plus in here? Thank you. Way to go.
Thank you.
But you know, if you're a Bulwark Plus subscriber, that actually most of it's free, like, because we are trying to make a difference. And so when you subscribe, what you're really doing is underwriting our ability to have massive impact, because we don't think you can do anything to help what's going on in democracy from behind a paywall. And so that's where we are now, and it seems to have like found its moment.
You know, it's interesting because the hiring, you know, great reporters like Will from the Washington Post and Catherine Rampell, that is a great hire. Congratulations.
Thanks.
On that. She's going to be great. Are you to some extent preparing for the, assuming there's going to be one, Sarah, the post-Trump era?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of my enduring beliefs now, and if you guys have been listening for a long time, you know, I came to this as like just a very sad and angry Republican, being like, what is happening? What is happening with voters? But I have become very convinced that the problem is not just Trump. Like Trump is both, he tapped into something that was pre-existing and then accelerated and expanded on it in a way where the Republican Party now is something that's just fundamentally different from what it was when I came into it. It stands for different things, its policies, and by stands, I mean it's basically now built around one person, but that doesn't mean that there's not a sense of what the post-Trump future could look like, and it is much more in the direction of the Tucker Carlson, sort of Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, and I'll let Will expound on all the different fractures that are going on in there as people start to think about what it means to be the heir apparent to Trump. But I can tell you one thing with great certainty, which is we are not going back to the Mitt Romney Republican Party. Like, even if you can find decent individual Republicans to elect here and there, the vast majority of them now, you know, Trump has sort of expunged the people that were like us and has brought in an entirely new generation of Republicans who just believe fundamentally different things. And it's going to be interesting because Trump is the glue that holds them together. But what it looks like next, there's going to be a fight for that. But I know it is not a fight in which one of the main challengers is the like Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio from 10 years ago wing of the party. Like that is just not where it's going.
So we'll talk about, I'm fascinated by, I read your newsletter and it's great. And for those of you who haven't seen this recent reporting about Kash Patel, who is, I hate to say, a person who has Nevada residency.
Yeah, a Vegas resident.
Yes, and seems to think he can be the head of the FBI from Vegas and flies here on that private jet all the time. There's been this blowback from, to some extent, from these stories that you've been doing, which I recommend, that, well, of course he has to fly on the FBI. He's the head of the FBI. He needs to fly on this. What kind of reaction have you gotten?
He needs to go to the UFC fight in Las Vegas.
Yes.
He needs to go to the UFC fight in Miami.
Visit his girlfriend, right?
Exactly. Constant trips to Nashville.
Is she a UFC fighter?
No, well, she performs at some of the wrestling matches. She sings, and I have to say that because said she performed at a wrestling match, and people said, "What?" You know, they thought pulling the mask off and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, the Kash Patel. I mean, this is a Vegas story, so it's a great one to talk about. But the FBI director is required to travel on a private jet, even for personal travel. Okay. But perhaps we don't have to then take, 36-hour jaunts to Vegas, to Miami constantly, And so this has been, certainly he's embattled at the moment, both because, from the left, I think people concerned about waste of government money for using the jet, and on the right because they're convinced his girlfriend, who's much younger, is a Mossad agent who is covering up for Jeffrey Epstein. And so, obviously there's nothing to that, but now she's been suing all these people. So that is the update on Vegas resident Kash Patel.
Now, people in MAGA world and whom you cover, they probably don't think that you're generally friendly to them.
Yeah.
And so do they talk to you?
There's a couple layers to this. Like Sarah, I was once a young Republican. I grew up in Texas watching Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly had a book for teenagers that I read that I was like, wow, this has shown me the world. I was 13. And then, but then, I stopped being a Republican, but I loved consuming right-wing media. And this was when people like Ben Shapiro, his whole thing was that he was a virgin. This was ages ago. But he was just sort of like, I'm a college student, I'm a virgin, what do you think of that? And so I was like, wow, this stuff is pretty interesting. There are some good personalities here. And then in 2016, obviously these characters are coming to the fore. I'd be at a party and someone would say, have you heard of Milo Yiannopoulos? Have you heard of Laura Loomer? And I would say, oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I've got, how long do you have? And so it's a funny world to cover. They have different personalities. Some people, I wrote a lot about QAnon. I wrote about, conspiracy theories, the Proud Boys. And sort of within these worlds, some people have a better sense of humor about it, are willing to talk to me, and some people absolutely hate my guts and all this stuff. But the third part is that this is an incredibly factional world, and there's a lot of people, to be frank, with pretty significant personality defects, and so they're constantly crashing into each other, and they want to betray each other, or they'll say, well, this guy got arrested, we brawled at this hotel in DC because I stole his girlfriend, and the Proud Boys were doing coke in the bathroom, all this kind of stuff, and they're quite happy to talk about that, so it's an exciting world for sure.
Well, they love attention.
No,
That's
They
the
love
other,
attention.
That's exactly right. They love attention, and they love dropping a dime on one another and kind of getting one of their former friends in trouble from me writing about it.
So one of the things, Sonny, that I love following you on, even though I hate the platform, is Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, because you sometimes will surprise me and you'll jump in on subjects that I don't think you're going to jump in on, which is great. I knew you mostly as a movie reviewer. What is the culture, the head of culture reporting for the Bulwark? What kind of portfolio? How broad is it?
Yeah, I write a lot about the business of Hollywood because I think this is all interconnected. It's all, Sarah mentioned YouTube, and I have been shocked to watch our organization rise on YouTube, but less so because I've been following how big YouTube is. Like, YouTube is the biggest streamer in the country. YouTube, by hours watched on television, YouTube is the biggest streamer in the country. It's where people have migrated to as the cable bundle collapses. And as the cable bundle collapses, and as those news outlets have to figure out how to survive, that changes how news is reported. It changes how everything happens. So there's a lot of that, and I have always thought of the Bulwark as in the same vein as like the Atlantic or the New Republic or the Weekly Standard of the early 2000s. And I don't think you can have a magazine of ideas, a journal of ideas, without having an actual culture section writing about. I do movies, but we have people who write about books, TV, the occasional theater piece. We get classy sometimes, not that often. But,
Let's not go too far.
But wait, one thing, let me just brag on Sonny for 1 second. But Sonny and I have known each other since I was in my early 20s, he was still in college. And he has been a movie reviewer and covering the space from the jump. It's weird to have somebody who knows. Actually, the first time I got published in the Weekly Standard, he published me because he was running the book reviews. And my parents would have the Weekly Standard open to my one piece in it, which was a book review of Maureen Dowd's. But he has
did you
been.
Like it? I can't remember. I honestly.
No, I tore it apart, and so my mom was very proud of that. But he has been doing he has pursued this for so long, and we've now worked together across multiple different things. And it is there used to be something that was like an axiom that politics is downstream from culture, but politics today is fused with culture.
Yeah, right.
And so even though it might seem weird to have a movie person, it actually is, for us, pretty essential to understanding the moment.
Yeah, I don't think it's weird at all. Sonny, one thing you weighed in on the other day that a lot of this audience is probably interested in, and we've talked about, is how this new sports betting and the fact that it's become so prevalent, and there's these scandals that have occurred. And I was shocked. I didn't even know this happened. Michael Wilbon, who's a very well-known sports journalist, actually said that he doesn't really care. And your reaction to that was great. Let me just read it. I'm sorry. If you're a sports journalist and your response to this variety of corruption on the playing field, which is all in caps, is I don't care, you should probably just retire because you've given up.
It's funny, we talk sometimes about things we've changed about, things we've changed our mind about at the Bulwark. And the only policy position, not, people who I respect or people who I would vote for, policy position is gaming, legalized sports gaming, which I have watched consume my friends. I have watched consume TV with the advertisements, et cetera, and now we see consuming the playing field. When you have players altering the outcomes of events on the field of play, this is a real problem. And now there's an argument that, well, you can just see it now because it's easier to track. You can watch these bets come in, and it becomes more obvious. It's always been happening. The mob's always been fixing these games. But I'm sorry, I just don't think that's true. I don't think that that's true. And I think it is much worse now that you can do it all with the touch of a button. And when you tie that to, I have my own issues with phones. I'm addicted to my phone. I cannot. My kids are constantly saying, "Daddy, put your phone away. Play with me." And I'm like, "No, I have to look at my phone. I'm kidding. I love I play with my children all the time. You have this addiction machine in everybody's pockets that are manipulating their endorphin rushes, and they're like, Also, you can tie your bank account to it. Also, you can bet on all these. Also, you can bet on every pitch in every game. I think that's a problem. I think we need to pull that back just a little bit. I'm not saying that sports gambling should be illegal on phones, but we need better regulation of this and what's happening.
I just wonder if it's too late for that. I just don't know if you ever can pull it back, right?
No, it's easy. You just put genies right back in bottles. It's fine.
Yeah,
Okay. Toothpaste.
I knew you'd have all
the
the
toothpaste all
solutions.
goes right back in. It's fine.
So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk a little politics, and all of you can weigh in on this. So there's been a lot. I mean, the thing that's changed since I started covering politics back in, I'm going to say it, 1986, is, because of the internet and social media, the velocity with which information moves and how fast things can change, and the insta-punditry that's almost immediately proven wrong, right? And so there's been all this stuff that just the last week, the shutdown and the end of the shutdown and all the punditry about whether the Democrats screwed it up or not, or whether they set themselves up for having health care be the centerpiece, the release of more Epstein files, and then just suddenly Trump is trying to deflect from the Epstein files by using the Epstein files to deflect by saying the Democrats should be investigating. And of course, Pam Bondi, yes, sir, I'll do this. I'll start with you, Sarah. What, if any of this, do you think has the potential to have staying power that 6 months from now, if we were sitting here, we still might be talking about the effects of it?
Not the shutdown. Yes, Epstein. I do think, and some of this, one of the most annoying traits of a Bulwark person is to be a former Republican who now wants to tell Democrats how they need to do better all the time. And Democrats on one hand are like, well, maybe that's good advice, but also shut up. There's a little bit of that. But I do think that Democrats struggle in a way. I come partly because when you come from a Republican background, you can just see the culture on the right is much more mercenary than the culture on the left, and also the communications infrastructure, the communications capacity to build echo chambers on the right, just dwarfs whatever Democrats can do. And one of the things that Democrats could do that to me seems fairly obvious is the story of Epstein is not just a story of whether or not Trump at some point engaged in either the raping of or whatever, or I don't want to use sleeping with because that's not right, of underage girls, whether he participated in the sex ring that Jeffrey Epstein was running versus covered up that sex ring versus, helped to get sweetheart deals. We don't know, but that's all swirling around right now. But it's actually a story of how Trump protects his rich friends and does not help people. Right? The most potent message that Donald Trump used in the 2024 election was that Kamala Harris was for they, them, but Trump was for you. I'm for you. I'm going to lower your grocery prices. I'm going to make your life better. And Americans right now are in a place where they say, if you were going to make my life better, I sort of don't care about your moral failings. I just really need things to be more affordable. And I think that if you were to say to people, not only are things not more affordable, but look, he's giving tax cuts to his rich friends. He's protecting them in a pedophile ring. Everything he does, he's building a ballroom for his rich friends, but your grocery prices aren't lower. It's all the same story. It's a story of corruption. It's a story of elite protection at the expense of the average American person. And I think that I wish that Democrats could sort of find the fire to tell that story relentlessly over and over again, because I think the taking away of healthcare and Jeffrey Epstein don't have to be different stories. They can be part of the same story. And I think if Democrats get there, I do think we'll be talking about Epstein in the future. The shutdown, that stuff goes away. It doesn't matter who won it or lost it. We were all losers in it. I do think it was helping Democrats show their voters when they have very limited power that they were trying to do something, trying to exact something. I would have liked to have seen them held out a little bit longer because I just felt like, man, you guys are really finally showing some spine. But there wasn't a great outcome. They went into it without a great plan for how to win. And so I just think that one goes away.
I'm interested that you say that you think that Epstein will still be being talked about 6 months from now or towards the election. Do you guys agree with that?
I think so. I mean, Sarah was pointing at this. This is a scandal that matters within MAGA's own terms and their view of the world. I mean, this is not, oh, you took a plane from Qatar or whatever. I mean, things that I think for those of us outside of it see as really bad, but I mean, they don't care. But, I mean, they were told for years, the client list matters. It's really important we get these files. Everyone associated with Epstein is this really sinister pedophile. And then suddenly, I mean, it's just weird, right? Like, it's been a couple months since we've been wrapped up in this world, but like, it is weird that suddenly Trump said no, or, and started insulting people who cared about the story. These are his biggest supporters. So I think it matters. And I think, on one hand, like, if you look at it, I mean, this is Donald Trump talking about, protecting as members of a billionaire pedophile network, people associated with them. I mean, even for Republicans, they're going to look at that and go, well, that's not good, right? And maybe they won't become Democrats, but it's sort of depressing, I mean, the other thing I would add is it's not just Republicans. I mean, it's also, let's say, kind of like Rogan versus, independents. And those are people who are also like really hopped up and they listen to these podcasts where they're always talking about Epstein. And then suddenly they're saying, well, why is Trump doing this? And, these are media figures who need to be kind of authentic with their audiences. And so unlike, for example, Charlie Kirk, some other people, Trump said, don't talk about Epstein. And suddenly they go, oh, okay, all right, guys, we're moving on from Epstein. In this case, I mean, Joe Rogan can't say that because he'll lose his audience. And so I think this issue is going to keep going and going.
I think the Trump MTG split is also very important to watch here, not because I think MTG is Marjorie Taylor Greene is a real threat in 2028 to run, but because that is the base of his base. Like, that sort of person is the base of his base. And he can accuse Lindsey Graham of being a rhino and get him back on side. He can accuse all sorts of Republicans of being, a rhino, unfaithful, loser, betraying Trump, whatever. And when he tries to do that to her, it doesn't work, I don't think. I think he looks soft and weak in a way that he doesn't with the rest of these guys. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I don't know if you're wrong. I do think right now we're in the middle of watching a proposition be tested. Can one of the most MAGA faithful, who you could never accuse of being a rhino, who is making the argument, and this is the thing to watch what she is doing, is she is saying Trump isn't looking out for you. He said he was going to, but he's actually not. And so if we are going to watch which way the power, does Trump, can he just crush her the way he's crushed other Republicans? Or does she have her own power base? Because and this is why Will's work is actually so extraordinarily important, even though it feels like, the Real Housewives of Mar-a-Lago. It's like actually figuring out what the future power centers are and where it's going from these voters is like genuinely important to politics, genuinely important to America. And then when you have those thoughts together, you think, oh, we're screwed. Like, well, how goes Laura Loomer? It has something to do with how goes the rest of the country, but it's true, it does.
We're staying across the street from BravoCon, by the way, which is going on right now. So I'm very excited for Will's the Real Housewives of Mar-a-Lago panel.
Yeah.
For this. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously right-wing media has a big impact. I mean, I think the other thing to underline, since we're on the Epstein topic, I mean, the last week or so was really bad for Trump in terms of that he's not looking out for you language. Leaving Epstein aside, this was also a week where he was defending H-1B visas, which have sort of come out of nowhere to be a really important issue on the right, and particularly the young, kind of disaffected right-wing men, many of whom got into computer science, many of whom basically are saying, well, I'm unemployed or I'm not getting the job I want because someone from outside the country got an H-1B visa. Oftentimes, I don't think that's the case, but Trump is defending these visas, and this is becoming like a real key issue now, particularly for kind of the Groyper right, if you will.
Actually, I just want to throw into the racism specter of like late stage Trumpism, which is different from early stage Trumpism, because while Trump was saying really terrible things, the racism piece of it, people were kind of like, well, he's famous, well, he's friends with Don King, well, he's friends with Omarosa. Like, there was this way in which Trump was actually very celebrity multicultural. But what's happened in the wake of Trumpism is, of course, he's a terrible person who's attracted many, many more terrible people into the ecosystem. And so you get somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy, who comes in early stage Trump, becomes a sort of a MAGA celebrity, and then suddenly is being hit with the most vile anti-Indian sort of rhetoric, people coming after him. And so people within the party are realizing, like maybe early stage Republicans did too, like Lindsey Graham, that actually much of the power base on the right, the vocal base, people who, especially for young voters who grew up where Trump was not anathema to politics, Trump was just normal politics as they'd always known it, are suddenly feeling the horror of engaging with these Nick Fuentes hopped up populations who say terrible things to them, terrible things to women. And so like one of the things that's fascinated me over the last week is watching Megyn Kelly. And Megyn Kelly.
What is wrong with her?
So she has decided that right now what she should do is go on her show and say, well, is it really pedophilia if it's not 8-year-olds, but actually it's like 15-year-olds? Isn't that more like, barely legal types? And I went, it took me and my team like 30 seconds to find 1 million clips of her from 10 years ago talking about Roy Moore and how awful it was, talking to Trump's early people, because there was this thing she put out on Twitter that was like, it's not like this came out and a slew of people have just jumped out to accuse Trump of sexual assault. And I was like, what are you talking about? That, like, so many people have accused Trump of sexual assault. Just like a year ago, he was found guilty in civil court and had to pay somebody $80 million in damages, E.G. and Carroll. And like, it doesn't even matter like how you feel about those specific cases. Like there has been an onslaught of accusations against Trump, and to go back and watch clips of Megyn Kelly, then and now, is like such a study in the shift and the way that people have contorted themselves to get on side with Trump.
It's interesting you say that, and you guys can weigh in on this too. Megyn Kelly is just one example, and you alluded to it earlier. I mean, I interviewed Marco Rubio, back when he was, I thought, a somewhat normal human being.
He was my guy.
And he was, he was as anti-Trump as anybody at one time. These people who have totally not just reinvented themselves, but memory holds so much. I mean, you're the culture expert, Sonny. How do people live like that? How do they look at themselves in the mirror? How do they go home to their families and say, oh, when I said that, I didn't really mean it?
Yeah, that's John. That's the $1 million question. I don't know, man. The best shorthand I have for this whole situation is that the Reagan Revolution inspired a generation of Alex P. Keaton types to come into congressional offices, to go into White House, to go into public service. And the Trump Revolution is inspiring a generation of Nick Fuenteses to come in. And like that's the difference right there. Now, how does Marco Rubio reconcile? He gets to be Secretary of State,
right,
and everything else. He's got 17 jobs in the administration now, whatever else he's doing.
Because it turns out you needed those Reagan people to actually run the government, and so that's why Marco Rubio has all the jobs.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing, is that you actually, and this goes back to an argument we had in Trump 1. Is it fine for competent, decent Republicans to work for Trump, who is a bad person and has bad policy positions? And I always said yes, because you need competent people to run the government. Like, the government still has things that need to be done, whatever. And I think that is getting more and more indefensible now, the more he is just doing things like pushing the tariff button every time somebody fails to bring him a gold bar, like it's bizarre.
So, well, I mean, first of all, are there formal expulsion procedures for Marjorie Taylor Greene inside MAGA? I mean, is there a ceremony like where they wear hoods or something?
Yes,
like
they extinguish her candle or something like that. I mean, it's so weird. And the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing is interesting because it is like the thing that pushed her over. It wasn't that made Trump kind of disown her. It wasn't, kind of making noise about the shutdown or criticizing the effort to end ACA subsidies. It was the Epstein stuff. Yeah. And that was when he goes, that is enough, you're out. And that's pretty interesting. I think that's very telling. I mean, we're talking about there's this real kind of roiling feud and kind of civil war going on in right-wing media, and that sort of extends to the Trump administration itself. Jumping on Sonny's point about the Nick Fuentes followers, after Charlottesville, there was a writer who said, the reason we're going to see more and more of these kind of racist young men, and particularly in the Republican Party, because that's where the energy is. And we've only seen in the past roughly 10 years since then, more and more of that. I mean, just in the past few months, we've had the Young Republicans racist chat leak. We had Paul Ingrassia, who was a Trump nominee. His text about, having a Hitler streak or a Nazi streak came out. And by the way, he pulled his nomination, and they gave him another job in the administration that doesn't require Senate confirmation. So, I mean, that is that's kind of the future of the party.
I want to talk about something that's been a great frustration to me as a journalist, and that is going all the way back to January 6th and what happened then, and the attempt by Trump to steal an election. You can call it a coup, you can call it an insurrection, I don't care really what you call it. And the number of people who enabled that, who could have tried to stop it. And then you fast forward. I mean, it's been frustration because, I have friends of mine, Ralston, stop talking about that. It's over. It's not over. He just pardoned dozens of the so-called fake electors. There are fake electors here in this state. There's 6 of them who are facing state charges that they thought they were going to get out of on a technicality. They're now going to face a trial here in Las Vegas. But what worries me about these pardons, Sarah, is that it's setting up a permission structure for these people to do the same thing next year and maybe in 2028. And now that Trump has the power of the presidency to, people I respect say they think that there could be, military people in the streets on election on election day, which again people say, oh, that's crazy. That's not going to happen. It's not crazy.
So here's, so right now, I've had people say like, well, look, we just had these off-year elections and there was no intimidation, there was no thing, people are overreacting. But I will say, it doesn't change anything for Trump other than the narrative. The reason that Donald Trump pushed Texas to do mid-cycle redistricting and kicked off these redistricting wars where then California had to do a redistricting, whatever, is because the fight over Congress in 2026 is a fight over whether or not there is oversight against Trump. And so Trump sees it as, and the Epstein stuff, you can see how panicked Trump is over the notion of oversight by people who he doesn't have his thumb on the way he does on Mike Johnson. And so, I don't know, that to me is like the most interesting piece of it.
But that's why there's so much at stake for him, and that's
yeah,
why.
Sorry, that's my point. Is just the idea of Trump won't do anything. I expect that Trump will do what it takes to protect himself from that oversight. Like that is why I worry about 2026, because I think he has a real sense of stakes about that. And now the redistricting thing hasn't worked out for him the way that he thought it would. It's going to be mostly a wash because Democrats, to their credit, both Gavin Newsom, who is not my favorite politician, but like to their credit, they are fighting back now. Because there was a period of time where I was very involved in, and still am in sort of democracy world. And one of the troubles with democracy world is nobody wants to play constitutional hardball. You want to say, no, like we shouldn't redistrict out of cycle. Like that's a bad thing to do. It's a race to the bottom. I have argued that. I would never argue that in this moment because you just cannot, we see it now, it's too clear. The Republicans are not gonna come save us. Like even the Democratic leadership is probably not gonna come save us. The media is like, we are gonna have to do it and it's gonna be by not caving to some of these things, to fight back. And so will Trump put troops in the streets? I think only if we let him. Like I think that there has to be, it's better to say, it is better to plan for troops in the streets and for it to not happen than it is to not plan for it and for it to happen. And so I think that there is there's a peer pressure among normies to say to other normies, you're overreacting. But as a person who told other people they were overreacting kind of early and that like, it's okay, these Republicans are responsible people, I'm talking about like 2017. And everything was about like, let's create incentives for there to stand up. And I watched none of it happen. We have to learn the lessons of the last 10 years.
Yeah, just to echo Sarah's point here, I remember where I was when January 6th happened. I was taping an episode of The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood. And I ended the interview and was getting back online, and the guy I was talking to was like, holy shit, what's going on at the Capitol? And I was like, oh. And so I turned on the TV and I see all this happening. We all watch it happen in real time. We see the gibbets out afterwards. We see the people chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and I'm like, oh, this is really bad. This is all really bad. Luckily, it all turns out fine. And everybody, all of the responsible conservative Republican types who I knew at the time were like, Trump needs to denounce this. He needs to be impeached. He's got to go. We can't. How can this have happened? Blah blah blah. And 90% of those people got back on side by 2024. And that's the thing that has driven me the craziest about all this. You ask about Marco Rubio. Again, he at least has a job out of all this. Like the people who got back on side after January 6th are the ones who drive me the craziest.
Yeah, yeah.
And now we're seeing this effort for senators who were investigated after January 6th to get $500,000 each from the government, right? This is in the budget bill. I mean, there is such an effort to sort of forget January 6th, and they say, or they'll fire people from the FBI who were involved in the investigation. They go, oh, this was so unfair. Why were they looking at our phone records, whatever? And it's like, well, because January 6th happened, man. Like, you saw the picture of people scaling and beating up cops.
We saw it happen. We watched it happen in real time. Like,
And of course, the best example of a person who has totally reinvented himself for obvious reasons is J.D. Vance, right? The guy went from America's Hitler.
He was one of us. He was a never Trump Republican.
Yeah, America's Hitler to whatever you say, Mr. President. And there's a sense, and I want to let you weigh in on this first, that he is the one, and I talked about this with John Podhoretz and Kevin Williamson yesterday.
Oh, J-Pod was here?
He was here, yeah. Yeah.
What did he say to this?
Well, let me just say that J-Pod had a lot to say, as you might imagine. And Sonny, by the way, I hope he's not still in Vegas and heard me call you the best movie reviewer in America, because he's going to be mad at me for that. But I guess what I'm wondering, Will, is what is the feeling in? I mean, there's a sense they talked about this, Sarah, about Vance recognizing better than any single politician the rise of white nationalists, the Nick Fuentes types, and that it has become, not a fringe group anymore, but is being absorbed into the mainstream of Republican politics. Is he their hero?
Yeah, well, they have a very complicated relationship with him. So the key thing to understand here is this group that considers themselves the new right, and this is pretty broad. It goes everyone from sort of an avowed white nationalist like Nick Fuentes to someone like Peter Thiel, these kind of like hardcore, kind of like Catholic, we should have a Catholic theocracy kind of guys, and basically the new right can explain itself like some of these guys want a monarchy. There's a guy named Mencius Moldbug that J.D. Vance loves, but it all is summed up by the idea that they feel the right in the past has been too restrained when it's had governmental power and too concerned about niceties like the Bill of Rights. And basically they say, all these institutions that aren't really government institutions like academia, business, media, we should just use our government power when we have it to crush them because they're out of control. And so we see things like Trump doing shakedowns of media organizations or law firms or universities. And that's very much within that mold. And so I think we're if J.D. Vance is the nominee or I mean, there's a whole coterie of people who represent that. And I think a lot more of that is ahead.
Will J.D. Vance be the nominee, sir?
I think he's the most likely person right now. I do think that there is going to be a fight. And this is one of my, I don't know if it's my bigger fears because I've got so many fears, but like one of them is that you end up with like a Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene ticket that is taking on the Vance Rubio ticket that sort of ends up with Trump's kind of tacit blessing, and that by the contrast of how insane the Tucker Marjorie Taylor Greene ticket will be, and that it will siphon off like the craziest of crazies, the hardcore, which is a decent chunk of the party now will be for them, but it will make J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio look like the normal ticket, which will be tough because J.D. Vance is, he's like one of the most extreme red-pilled people who both like, because I can't identify with the psychology of it, but I've watched it happen to a lot of people that I know for real and have known in real life. And there's an intensity. What is that phrase? It's like, there's no one's more intense than a convert or something like that. And J.D. Vance is like that. And J.D. Vance is also, he's hollowed out his core through all of this. And so now he can be anything. Like he's just a total chameleon. But I do think voters like him, kind of. They see him as having Trump's imprimatur. They think that he is smart. But then there's like a whole other group of people in the Republican Party that don't like him. Like he's not a perfect candidate. And this is why I would just like to point out there are Trump 2028 hats. Because taking over from Trump as the head of the Republican Party is not an easy thing to do because it is wildly factional now, and J.D. Vance is more of a factional person than he is somebody who like can be the big tent that all these people can gather underneath.
So,
Sarah, didn't you say in one of your recent focus groups that the Trump voters do seem to be over the idea of Trump 2028?
Yeah, although part of that, there's a little bit of it that is Trump himself saying he thinks he can't. And as soon as Trump said it, that gave permission to people who just take whatever Trump says to be like, oh, well, I guess he's not going to run again. No, but I will say, like, the thing about listening to regular people and not the online people, the like real, is that they do not. First of all, whenever Will tells me about people, I'm like, I have no idea this is going on, and I'm a pretty avid consumer of the news. You can imagine just a regular person who has a job and a family and has been a Republican all their life. They don't know what Laura Loomer's doing. They don't sit on Twitter. Twitter is used by a very small number of like power users and people. And so it's like big in the sense that it's having an enormous impact on the culture of the Republican Party, but also not so big that these are all household names and things that the average voter understands. But generally, like the voters were kind of like normie-ish in the sense that like, no, he can't, we need new blood. Like he can't run again, he shouldn't run again. Also, there's like a weird, sometimes this happens where just little conservative instincts, you see them flare up in people and you're like, oh, there it is. And they're like, well, term limits are good. And you're like, oh yeah, conservatives who believe in term limits, look at that. But that is the reason for the Trump 2028 is people don't know what to do after Trump because those marginal voters that he turns out are like Trump-only voters. And Trump spent the last 10 years telling a lot of those voters they can only trust him and not the Republican Party in general.
So we only have a few minutes left, and Sonny, I wanted to ask you about something that you discussed recently, since we're talking about media and politics and the rest of it, with Dave Itzkoff, and that's Network.
Oh yeah.
And what relevance it still might have today. I hope all of you here have seen the movie Network. If you haven't, go watch it after this. And I've been thinking about that since you did that, and there's so many things, it seems to me, that could still be resonant about that movie today.
The Network is fascinating to watch because there are so many of the same fights that are happening now that were happening in that movie. One of the big one, of course, is kind of media consolidation. You know, the whole kind of driving thrust of the plot underneath all of the, you know, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore stuff is, you know, the media company is being purchased by a big international conglomerate, and there's a line where Robert Duvall's character says something like, the FCC can hold this deal up for 20 years, we can't do anything. I'm like, oh, that seems relevant. You know, but it is also just about the coarsening of the media environment, the ridiculous show that they put on with the you know, the psychic lady and the robot that is, you know, polling people. It's so good. It's still so good. Everyone should watch it if they have not seen it. And if you have seen it, you should watch it again because even at 50 years old, it is as relevant as ever.
Well, one thing I've been thinking about, and all of you can chime in if you want on this, and I discussed this with several people. The Bulwark, I mean, you read the Bulwark, and in the morning you read JVL's long form, you read Will's long form, Sonny, you do long form stuff as well. And the fact that what Trump really relies on is people's short attention spans. And so there's just unfortunately a limited audience for that. And that's why it's great and remarkable that you've been so successful, and I admire it, because you know what we do, it's not I don't compare it, but the Independent, we don't do like daily turn of the screw. We do more in-depth kinds of pieces, and I've always believed that there was a yearning for people trying to make sense out of a crazy world for that kind of thing. Do you think that kind of journalism can survive?
The long form, or what? I do, and in fact, you know, I think about this a lot. I'm not texting people. I'm gonna read you guys a quote in a second, but I think that it's interesting to me that the role of the media has done so, like CNN has done so many more of these like shout fest chat shows and so much opinion, because I think that legacy media has such an opportunity right now to do reporting. There is an endless number of people now who can sit around and do commentary, but the real reporting ability is what everybody who has an opinion draws on. And what the right did was create a world where they could have their own facts to chew on for their audience, which has created algorithmically separate worlds where nobody's, you know, it's funny, the network stuff, it's like, in some ways everything old is new again. In some ways we've faced all these problems before. The quote that I was looking at is a Lincoln quote. And from Abraham Lincoln, he says, in this age, in this country, public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Against it, nothing can succeed. And that is from like the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And I was using this quotation for something I was writing, so I went and like read about it for a really long time. And they were talking at the time, the Lincoln-Douglas debates was happening at this time of enormous cultural and technological change. Like the Morse code and the trains, the railroad system had allowed them to take these speeches and have them go out to the world and be published in newspapers, and in a way that this stuff had never happened before. And so they were out there fighting for public opinion with these debates. That's what it was about. And it was obviously at this moment where it was like, who is this country going to be? Are we going to have slavery? Are we not going to have slavery? Like, and they fought about this. And it's like, it is not different today, what we are doing. We are still trying to preserve this fragile democracy based on a set of principles that we have to try to keep people committed to. It is about how do you get public sentiment on your side. And so for me, that's why I talk to voters. It's why I listen to them, because public sentiment still is everything, because democracy is just a collection of people who make their collective will known through elections, and that's how we go places. And so the information that undergirds all of that, the real true information that's based on serious research, like, is essential to all of it. If we let it go, that is like a big piece of democracy that will fall away. And I think that pushing our media institutions to recommit to that side of it, because they are uniquely suited to do it, is a thing that we could do that would be like good for democracy, good for the media. So you keep that up. Don't stop.
I appreciate that, and yeah, applaud on that. I can't think of a better note, inspirational note. Thank you, Sarah, to close this panel on. I so appreciate all three of you making the trek to Vegas to come and do this with me. It's been a blast having you here. Let's give them all a round of applause. And
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Since this is the final panel of IndyFest 2025, I want to thank all of you for coming, especially those of you who came both days, those of you on the live stream. Thank you. That's a wrap. We'll be back next year.
All right.